And good morning and welcome to The Skinny here on WMNF 88.5 FM. I'm Mitch Perry, senior political reporter with the Florida Phoenix, joined by my colleague, freelance reporter Ben Montgomery. Good morning, Ben.
Hey, good morning, Mitch. How are you?
Great. Ray Roa is still AWOL, but we're told he will be back next week, so we look forward to seeing that. Okay, in today's show, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a political roundtable with several folks involved in the political process here in the Tampa Bay area. And top of mind is a new Fox News poll that came out last night that has some Florida Democrats giddy in the race in the Sunshine State between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. We'll have much more on that and the latest on the VP sweepstakes for Donald Trump as well. But first, here in the state of Florida, there's still 67 bills that have yet to be sent to Governor Ron DeSantis' desk that were passed during the most recent legislative session. Before many of them will go into effect, those laws will go into effect on July 1 if he doesn't sign them. And perhaps the most interesting and controversial of those bills is Senate Bill 280. That is the bill that would give the state more power to regulate short-term vacation rental platforms such as Airbnb and Vrbo. And basically, to give you a little primer on that, back in 2011, the state took away the power to regulate Airbnbs from local governments and preempted it to the state, which, as many of you know, they do on so many other issues. But there was significant pushback, and the legislature went back and amended the law in 2014 to allow local governments the ability to handle issues like noise, trash, and parking, but continue to prevent them from regulating the duration of the frequency of short-term rentals. And since then, the legislature every year has attempted to pass another bill to give more power to Tallahassee on this issue. And finally, this year, they did, one of the closest votes in the House. And so joining us right now to talk about this bill right now, but he's a critic of it, is a mayor out in Pinellas County, Redington Beach Mayor David Will. David, good morning. You there with us?
Yes, good morning, Mitch. Thank you for having me.
David, you've been a leading critic of this measure that's sponsored, we should say, by Pinellas County Republican Nick DeSegle from Indian Rocks Beach, which is I've classified as ground zero in this battle between the neighbors and the folks who own these vacation rental homes. David, you were, of course, elected mayor in 2021 there in Redington Beach, and you've become a real, I saw in the last couple of years up in Tallahassee advocating against these measures. What's your real beef with this bill, Senate Bill 280?
Well, the real beef is that this removes the ability that was given in 2014. So thank you for giving a quick history there. So before 2011, local communities could regulate land use and zoning as they saw fit, and that would include the Airbnbs. They could prohibit them if they wanted to. And in 2011, that was taken away. And then, as you mentioned, there was so much pushback. So in 2014, the legislature said, all right, you can't prohibit vacation rentals, but we're going to allow you to regulate them to try and maintain the family, your residential and family character of your town. So what this bill does, this bill takes us backwards, back to 2011, and removes abilities from towns and creates a uniform registration system. So when this bill says it allows, it really should say it only allows, because there is nothing in this bill that we cannot already do.
Right. And David, so what's the nature of the short-term vacation rentals in your community there in Redington Beach? I mean, do you hear complaints from folks, from noisy vacationers out there and on the weekends and what have you?
Well, of course. I mean, you're mixing. These are hotels. This is a business in a single-family residential community. So there's two different dynamics. There are two different uses. So when you're on vacation somewhere, of course, you're in a different mindset. You don't have to go to work in the morning. But then the house next door has children who have to get up and go to school. You have to get up and go to work. So you're like mixing nuts and gum together, is what I like to say. It just doesn't work.
Right. Now, there are folks who actually, and definitely there's been a lot of, opposition to this bill. There's also people who support this bill. There was Pat Inman, who was the owner of the Denim Inn in Monticello, Florida, wrote an op-ed that was widely circulated a few weeks ago, advocating that the governor should sign the bill. Let me quote what she wrote. She said, "The truth is that this legislation simply strengthens existing law. All vacation rentals are currently required to register with the state and pay the appropriate taxes. It's just not happening. Senate Bill 280 takes a positive and necessary step to establish some basic accountability in the state to protect visitors and Florida's reputation as a family-friendly and safe travel destination." There are even mayors in the Pinellas County. I know Treasure Island Mayor Tyler Payne. He supports this bill. So why are they okay with this? And you and many others, I should say, local mayors around the state, especially in these, vacation kind of communities, beach areas, specifically coastal communities. Why is the conflict here with some of the local mayors here?
Well, this bill removes the ability for that community to make their own decision. If Treasure Island likes what's in this bill, then they have the ability right now to accept that bill or to take that, to agree to that and take that on. We, Redington Beach and other towns, do not. We have our own regulations that have been in place since 2014 and have worked for us. And since then, since we've been able to regulate since 2014 throughout the entire state, the Airbnb industry has grown and is thriving. So to me, that is a sign of a piece of legislation that's working.
Again, if you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Redington Beach Mayor David Will out in Pinellas County, talking about Senate Bill 280. Has yet to be sent to Governor Ron DeSantis. This would give more regulations, more control of these Airbnbs and Verbos to the state of to the Tallahassee versus local government control. And this is something, David, I know, right? And we've talked about this on the show, and it's really a trend that's gone on for years. And that is, again, Tallahassee preempting more power from local governments like yours up to the state. You've become a big critic against this, and have you learned something about this? Did you really know a lot about it before you became mayor a few years ago?
Well, I was commissioner for several years beforehand, so then I got to see firsthand the results of preemption, where we have the legislature will preempt the local community on a specific issue, and then our residents will be coming in saying, hey, what's going on? But then our answer would be, well, that was the state preempted us. And then it would usually end there. They're upset, we're upset, but you've taken the voice of the resident away or steering the direction of their community. So, I mean, however you feel about vacation rentals, positive or negative, the real issue is the preemption. It's taking you out of the discussion, taking your voice away from having an input on the direction of your community. If you have a residential community, I'm assuming you moved there for that reason, and you would like to keep it that way. So with this preemption, the residential community will go the way of the dinosaur.
David, if it was up to you, which is not, of course, but if it were, how would you have these regulated in your community?
Well, that would be up to each community.
Well, how would you do it in Redington Beach?
Well, we set the communities can set. Well, the only thing you can't do is prohibit and regulate the duration and the frequency. So you can regulate parking, you can regulate occupancy, you can regulate all kinds of things like that. So when the senator says that you can still regulate noise, parking, and trash, what they're leaving out, the devil is in the details, is that this bill says only if it applies to every home in the community. So you either have to regulate the entire community as short-term rentals or the entire community as single-family homes. See, right now, in 2014, we were given the ability, and that was in the SB 356 and HB 307 for 2014, we were given the ability to distinguish. So you have rules and regulations for a single-family home and rules and regulations for short-term rentals, because they're obviously two different entities. And now that is being taken away.
All right.
Who's backing this, David? Is there big money for either side? Oh, well, the industry wants this to happen because what they're looking for is a uniform policy throughout the entire state. Of course, that makes things easier on them. So my understanding is they're tired of, this community has this regulation and this community has that regulation. But we have 411 cities throughout our state, and each one is different.
All right.
And what may work for the Panhandle may not work for Orlando or the Keys.
David, it's interesting, right, that the bill has yet to be sent to the Governor DeSantis. I think this is one of the more controversial bills left. And, it's interesting, folks. I've heard from several lawmakers throughout the state who say this is the number one issue, more than even property insurance, that they get responses from their constituents from. So a lot of people care about this, certainly. They're waiting to see what the governor does here. Any predictions on how you think he'll come down on this?
I have no predictions. Of course, I'm hoping for a veto, and I know there's been a lot of opposition. And our residents and throughout the state, people are writing letters and notifying the governor's office that they would like a veto for this bill.
All right, we'll leave it there. That's Reddington Beach Mayor David Will talking about Senate Bill 280, the bill that would give more power to the state to regulate short-term vacation rentals such as Airbnbs. And everybody's really watching this. David, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Great. Thank you for having me. Anytime.
All right. Okay, we're going to transition now, and we've got some folks in here. We're still missing one of the guests, but we're going to talk politics here for the rest of the hour, state politics, local politics. We've got in studio Vic DeMaio, Hillsborough County Democratic political consultant, and on Zoom, another Hillsborough Democrat, Maya Brown. Maya, are you there? Not hearing Maya right now. All right, so we'll hopefully, we're also hoping to get a Republican, and we can call him that. Definitely he is one from Pinellas County. Barry Edwards will be joining us shortly, too. While we work on getting Maya back, let's start with you, Vic. Good morning, Vic.
Good morning. Good morning. Good.
Okay,
I'm happy to be here.
Great to have you here. So, big story. Democrats are kind of buzzing about this morning, and I don't know how seriously we want to take this or not. So, Fox News has a survey that came out last night of some swing states, and it's kind of nice they've included Florida in that, since we're really not considered one right now. And it shows Donald Trump leading Joe Biden by only 4 points. Now, this was done of registered voters, not likely voters, and so there is a difference there. But what's your initial take about that?
I think this is every race is different, obviously, and I've been doing this for many, many decades, going back to the Bob Graham days in the 80s, where the Democrats ruled the roost and the Republicans come over and kind of taken over the House and Senate and the governor's mansion and everything else. So it's been a bit of a transition. Although, Barack Obama won this state twice,
Well, but Vic, that was not only I want to say a political lifetime ago, but it was also when there was hundreds of thousands more Democrats registered than Republicans, and it's completely the opposite now.
And think about it. And this is what I tell everybody, including you guys and everybody listening, okay? The Republicans, think about it, took over the House, the Senate, and the governor's mansion statewide when the Democrats had 1 million more voters.
Yeah, in the 90s.
Okay, now everyone's crying because now the Republicans have 1 million more voters. What's the difference? I mean, Barack Obama, if you told me, and I was born and raised here, my family's been here 110 years. If you told me an African-American guy named Barack Hussein Obama was going to win the state of Florida twice, I would tell you you're crazy. But he did. And so did Bill Clinton. We have a long history of electing Democratic presidents in this state of Florida. So it's been a long time coming. And if you do this a long time, it takes, you can sign somebody up, but if it lets you track those people to vote, they're not going to vote. And then you have a lot of drop off. People may sign up to vote, they'll vote for the president, and then they'll leave. They'll vote for president and senate, and they'll leave. So going down the ticket, I don't know, coattails is a very misused term a lot of times. Now, last time we did have a couple of Democratic county commissioners that got beat by complete unknowns here in Hillsborough.
Well, Democrats got their
can I interrupt on that?
out.
Coattails.
Well, Barry just joined us, by the way.
Okay, Barry Edwards joining us. Our
Republican
Republican in the room now from Pinellas County.
And he's 15 minutes late.
So, Barry, okay, with the Fox News poll, we'll be talking about that to start off the show here from last night. Evan Power, the Republican Party of Florida chairman, just texted me. He says this is an outlier, much more left-leaning audience that was tested in this poll than is going to be voting in November.
Well, I think the first thing first of all, let's talk to coattails. Coattails have been extensively researched, especially by Dr. George Edwards, the most.
And you're the one that said coattails that you can't
do not exist.
Right. So I'm taking from the esteemed
by
Barry
definition.
Edwards.
By definition, a coattail means that you get more than the president. So if the president gets 51% and the congressman gets 60%, obviously the president's not pulling him over. The congressman's pulling the president over.
When
Ronald Reagan, who
Can you answer the question though?
That's a few things. That's one of the few things we agree on.
Okay. So almost all these things in politics are measurable. This poll probably is an outlier. The best thing to do is go to the Real Clear Politics average.
8 points right now is the average of the RCP right now of Trump over Biden in Florida.
And for polling that get really measure for when you go to likely voters, it increases. I think the Foxes are registered voters. When you switch to the registered voter to likely voters, the Republicans typically gain 2 to 3 points.
And we should also say that when it includes Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's not officially in the ballot yet, but probably will be soon, and also Jill Stein and Cornel West, it's a 7-point lead for Trump in this poll.
Right.
So when you include the other candidates, I think we have Maya available. Maya, are you there? Maya,
Hi there. Yes, I am.
Okay, Maya, let's
can you
get
hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Great. Absolutely good to have you here. Maya, your take on this poll that came out last night that shows Trump only up by 4 points over Joe Biden.
I thought it was 5.
Well,
Four.
You know, Mitch, one, thank you so much for having me. And two, I will tell you, this has been the talk of all the group chats and political conversations that I've been in to date. So it certainly has folks paying attention to what's happening. Some folks are taking this as Democrats as a really good sign, and other folks are saying that this is just not good math for us, right? One of the things I think that's important to for us to remember is that Trump won in 2020 with 3 points in the state of Florida. So this is not a good sign in terms of Trump being up by 4 points. So this is certainly a step back for Democrats. But I think it also is a sign that Democrats certainly are not 20 points in the red like we saw in 2022. So I think certainly it's a mixed bag. It's kind of, half a dozen on one side and 6 eggs on the other.
Well, staying with you, Maya, and then bring it to the other panelists here. To me, the biggest story in Florida politics is something we just touched on a moment ago, which is the voter registration gap. Right now, I think this past week it hit 900,000, the highest in the history of the state of Florida, of Republicans over Democrats. Maya, sticking with you for a moment. I keep on hearing from Democrats. I talked to a party chair earlier this week who told me this whole thing about voters being taken off the rolls and what have you. And it's like, okay, whatever. I mean, I don't know if that's happened or not. But the fact is, and again, you have 5 months before the election. But you can't keep on using that as an alibi about why you have this huge voter registration gap. What's your thoughts about the fact that right now Democrats are in a huge hole historically in the state in terms of voter registration compared to Republicans?
And unprecedented.
Absolutely. I've actually penned an op-ed about this that was featured in Florida Politics. So shout out to them for covering that. And I really talked to Mitch about exactly what you're saying. Florida Democrats have had a problem of turnout, and for the last 20 years, we have almost cried wolf and said that we've also had a voter registration problem, which we have not. Florida Democrats have had a voter registration advantage since the last time we were in political power. Now we have both, as you mentioned, with this ridiculous gap. And it's caused really by a couple of things. One, the inactive voter changes that the state legislature in their infinite wisdom decided to redefine. And then two, the other problem that we're seeing now is that so many people were removed from the rolls from the vote by mail absentee ballot program. So now we have to re-enroll those folks. But you're absolutely right. That is not an excuse. And what we're finding is that so many people who are would be our people are disaffected. They are apathetic about the process, and we have not delivered the way we should have on reasons why folks should show up and participate and vote for Democrats. So we have a lot of work to do, especially before the primary, and I believe the books close on that in late July for voter registration. And I think that certainly we are going to see, unfortunately, some really depressed turnout, obviously, when it comes to Hillsborough County and across the state.
And we'll get into that in a moment about the support or not for Joe Biden. Barry, again, you just mentioned a historic gap here of Republicans.
And I want to give a shout out. The two people that wrote the first articles about 4 years ago about voter registration changing were Rob Lori and you. You were the first ones to report that in interviews with me, and everybody discounted us and said we were wrong, and we turned out to be absolutely 100% right. So first of all, there's two types of vote. If you vote after 8 years in Florida, if they haven't been able to contact you, you haven't voted in 4 cycles, they take you off and you're removed from the voter file. Since 1998, because I called all 67 supervisors, nobody after 8 years, because they were either dead or left, tried to vote. So the idea that we're doing purging or voter suppression, that's nonsense. And these laws were passed when the Democrats controlled. So if we're going to attack these, we need to go back to Bob Graham, because Bob Graham was one of the big advocates of these laws, and Ruben Askew. So I just want my friends to know that. But number two, on inactive means after 4 years. You haven't voted. We send you 3 letters, one forwardable, one non-forwardable, one certified, and they can't find you. And you've got a little sticker that says you've been forwarded out of the county. They pull you off the active rolls, which only makes counties like Hillsborough look like you have higher participation, and they move you inactive. All you have to do is show up and show a photo ID, and you can vote. All you have to do is show a photo ID.
Right.
Okay, and we know that blacks support photo IDs by over 80%, because the idea that the poor black woman or poor black man or poor white cracker is not going to have a photo ID, that may have been the case in the 40s.
Well, we don't have that issue here in Florida. We have voter ID.
We don't have that problem.
Right, we don't have, right, but I just wanted discounts because that's one of the attacks that Nikki Fried has brought up. Okay, so next, we got a lot of things here. Okay, so the next thing is, if you vote by mail, all you have to do is show a copy. You take a copy of your photo ID and send it. You haven't voted in 4 years, and your voter.
But Barry, let's interrupt
there's
there.
No
Hold on.
suppression. Okay. There's no suppression.
But
and
that
most of the people have moved out of the last 113,000 that Hillsborough did. Only 1,000 were in the county.
All right, hold on now. Again, if you're just tuning in right now, you're listening to the Skinny here
These
in
are
WMNF.
excuses by people that are losing.
Okay, Barry Edwards, a Pinellas County Republican consultant with us. Vic DeMaio and Maya Brown from Hillsborough with us here. Okay, well, it is a new rule that was passed in 2021 that is now in effect this year. Is you have to, if you're a vote by mail voter, basically, you now have to. You're not getting that mail ballot this year. You now have to go yourself
every cycle. Yeah,
right. And so that's new. And so we've seen this. Politico Florida reported on this. Gary Fine reported on this a couple days ago that this is down for Republicans and Democrats. Okay, but it's down like half, 50%. But basically, I think from 4 million at this time 2 years ago to 2 million. And Democrats, Vic, are really they've done a lot in the last few years since coronavirus in terms of emphasizing vote by mail. Although, as we know, Barry, as opposed to the rest of the country, Republicans have embraced vote by mail. I do think it's funny because Trump is now, they're trying to get him to say that now with the Republican
Party. And Pinellas County is a leader in vote by mail.
Right, absolutely. With Deborah Clark and now with Julie Marcus. Your take on what he's just been saying there, Vic DeMaio, with Barry?
Well, I mean, and I'd like to have a few minutes here since I got to split, Yeah,
you got to go in.
And Barry can go yammer on for the next half an hour if he wants to.
No, he won't.
So since I have the floor.
And by the way, I want to tell the listeners, they should be part of this conversation as well if they like to be. 813-239-9663. Okay.
So, because I'm doing a show at WDU Channel 3.
Thank you for telling us about that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm promoting. It starts at tonight.
Are you going to get to the point
tonight at 8:30 and then Sunday at
12 o'clock?
I'll be on. Well, you'll hear me for a whole half an hour. But the thing is, there's a lot of dynamics going on here that I think will change things. Nothing's really set in stone or gold. For example, I know this may be indirectly connected, but NBC Nightly News did a story a few days ago, showing a national story showing that Florida is not the utopia that Ron DeSantis has promoted.
The conservative
people
utopia.
Are leaving. Yes, okay. People are leaving the state because once they get to paradise here, they realize our taxes are through the roof, our homeowners insurance is through the roof, car insurance is through the roof, and it's expensive as hell to live here. And even the Republicans thinking they can come here so they don't have to wear a mask and take a coronavirus shot are saying, I'm out of here. I'm going back to North Carolina or New York.
Well, taxes are in the lowest 5, so I don't know what study you have. I just like facts here. I'd like you to show me any study that shows that we're not in the bottom 5.
Here we go.
Vic, that's a lie.
This is why
I don't like people to misinform.
This is why I don't like to be on the show.
This is fake news, Vic.
This is why I don't like to be on the show.
You're making stuff up. Show me a study that shows that we're in top taxes.
This is why I don't like this.
Well, that's not true.
Barry, in fairness to Vic, I think he wasn't pointing to taxes. He was saying...
He said taxes. He used the word taxes. That was his lead off.
Car insurance, homeowners insurance.
He said taxes was his lead off thing that he said.
Taxes are high.
They're not the highest in the country. They're lowest 5.
Because of inflation, people's property taxes are pretty damn high because I have to pay my mom's and my taxes on homeowners, and it's gone through the roof because of the increase in property values because of inflation. So yes, taxes are high, despite what this.
Okay, go on.
So the point is, I think there's going to be a lot of dynamics changing here. Between now and Election Day.
Okay.
It is not a given. The poll you showed, it being an outlier.
Right.
The fact that voter registration is down. The fact that we have to re-sign up people for vote by mail. That's got to happen on both sides.
But you would agree.
The disadvantage the Democrats have is they don't have the money that the Republicans do to do these sort of things. And if you look back to when Barack Obama won this state twice, Bill Clinton and others, it's because nationally they poured a lot of money in here.
And we saw in 2022, the last election here, there was virtually no money coming in from outside groups.
Correct.
Because they felt like it wasn't going to be competitive.
Because
Val Demings
the cycle
outspent Marco Rubio.
the cycle before that, they invested invested. Bloomberg put $50 million in the coffers for the Democrats because he didn't like Donald Trump, who's their new Floridian. I think the media and and all the attacks against Donald Trump really haven't kicked in. You haven't seen, except for the pot stuff.
Will they ever kick in? I mean, come on, people. He's a pretty known brand at this point.
Oh no, I know, and you will be able to. You're gonna see it kick on. The persuadables. You're really only after a very small percentage at this point. So if you see a poll like what we talked about at the beginning of the show about this poll that shows 4% difference, that's huge.
How many persuadables are in Florida?
I think people's. Again.
Okay. By the way, let's just have a transition here. We got a call, actually. Somebody calling in. We don't know who this is yet. Hi, you're on the air. Hello, is the caller there? We went directly without the call screener here, so I don't know if this is going to work. I'll ask again. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to drop that. Okay. Sorry for that. Let's transition here, folks.
Point is, this race, in my opinion, nationally is tied.
Yeah.
A lot of people say it's 4%, 5%, but if you take the plus or minus thing in there, which could be up.
But Vic, I want to say with Florida, though, right?
And Florida too. I mean, I really think that at the end of the day, we may not win Florida, but we don't need Florida. We've learned.
But the Democrats do not need it. Republicans do need it.
If we can win Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, those states,
right?
Florida's a wash because you got DeSantis here. Who, to me, I keep going back to the primary where Trump came in for obviously first place, and Nikki Haley came in 17%, and then DeSantis, I think, got 3%. So DeSantis's bright shining star has really dropped tremendously over the last couple of years.
If you're just tuning in right now, it's 11:32 here on WMNF. Mitch Perry with Ben Montgomery. We're talking about Florida politics right now. We've got, I want to transition right now. We've got, again, 3 consultants from the Bay Area here who work with candidates all the time here. Barry, let's go to you on this, and that is the VP sweepstakes right now. NBC News came out with a story earlier this week that had a short list, supposedly, of what Trump is looking at, and that included Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Now, some people will say, well, look, he's from the same state. I mean, how is this really going to work? Do you think that's really credible, that Rubio could be a viable choice for the former President Trump?
He could. We're going to give you some scoops on this.
Okay.
So the only vice presidential candidate in the last 100 years that actually moved votes and brought a state was LBJ, Lyndon Johnson, who brought Texas.
In 1960.
In 1960. So typically they don't. One of the best campaigning vice presidents was Al Gore, who was a neighboring state to Arkansas from Tennessee. Okay. So, and they would have won Tennessee anyway. And then and then Gore didn't win his home state, I think, when he ran for president. So the idea that he needs to bring Florida is if you brought Marco Rubio, number one, he's a great speaker. He's had 3 races in Florida where the Democrats thought they were going to take him out, and he won by 14.
No, I think he's a good credentials. I'm saying,
and he's also Hispanic. So
but the idea being that though taking again, they're both Florida men, if you will.
Right. So Trump would have to relocate, otherwise you'd lose the electoral votes.
And you think he'll go back to New Jersey or New York to be?
I don't think it really matters where he can go to Atlanta and just.
But it won't be Rubio. You think it'll be Trump that would move
so
out.
the state legislature passed a law that allowed Ron DeSantis to run for president or vice president and not have to resign. So that would affect Marco also. So Senator Rubio would not have to resign, but if he leaves the state and changes his residency to Nevada, he resigns immediately.
Okay.
So I just don't think, if I'm Marco Rubio, there's too much of a risk to do that because your career's over. Now, if you probably would be the nominee afterwards, but it's still a big risk. Here's the problem. So as soon as Marco Rubio was mentioned, a lot of our right-wing or MAGA congressmen are going nuts because the number one insider rumored candidate because if there's a vacancy, if Trump were to win and Marco becomes vice president, that Senate seat becomes vacant. In Florida, the governor appoints. Well, the governor is closest to Laura Lee. And that has been driving.
So the rumor is that he would select Laura Lee. I
talked to 4 Republican congressmen that called me and want to know how we can stop that. And I said, you can't stop it because you'd have to change the state law. And if you change the state law, DeSantis would have to sign it. He's not going to give up that power. But this morning, I talked to another 2 Republican congressmen, and they were heard that, and this is all, first of all, Trump would have to pick Rubio, and then he'd have to win for this to kick in.
Right.
If DeSantis would just appoint himself, which would be the smart thing to do.
Interesting. Vic,
And so
before
I
you
think
leave
that-
here,
that changes-
your thoughts
that
on
I
changes
really
the
have to
dynamic.
go. Next time I'll be more happy to come on, as long as this guy's not on.
Oh, okay.
That
So I
changes.
can have 5 minutes to talk.
That changes the whole dynamic of Florida because Jeanette Nunez becomes the governor. So I think that probably has derailed Rubio from being picked.
Really? Okay, that's very interesting. Maya Brown, what do you think about this in terms of, you've got, of course, the Biden-Harris race here. Is there any Republican that you would like to see Donald Trump select that you think it might help out the Democrats?
I mean, I think it really doesn't matter who he picks because they are all, anyone who subscribes to Donald Trump's ideology and political ideas are out of lockstep with Florida Democrats, right? So we've seen recently that Congressman Byron Donalds has been a long-term Trump ally in the state of Florida and continues to be featured in the news saying ridiculous things that are, again, out of step with what Floridians believe. He just said not too long ago, was recently on Joanne Reed's show, trying to substantiate his claims that life for Black Americans were better under Jim Crow. Again, out of lockstep with what we know to be true. And as a Black woman, I know for certain that my ancestors would disagree with that. So sure, pick him, and he's also been rumored to run for governor too. So him, Matt Gaetz, Marco Rubio, take your pick. I think it's certainly going to, again, substantiate that he, as 34-time, I guess,
felonies,
been indicted and convicted, right? Like, is not fit for the office of president again. And I don't think it matters if he picks as VP.
Okay, we do have a phone call here. I think this is going to work. Let's see if DeAndre's on the line here. Hello, DeAndre?
Hello, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Hey.
Hey, good morning. I was just curious, given the rates on insurance, and it's been a long time question for myself, how aren't insurances basically taxes but by another name? I've never really, as long as I've had to pay them, I've never truly understood that. And I know this isn't necessarily the kind of question we throw out right now amongst these this forum, but it just seems like, how can anybody get by?
Well, right. Well, I think, DeAndre, I think you're saying it's a cost of living. Yeah. It's whether they're taxes or insurance, you got to pay it, right?
I told the Charlie Crist campaign that if they focused on that instead of abortion, he would have been 8 points closer. But they defaulted to the extreme of their base, and it was a disaster. Whereas if you
how is that extreme though? When the majority of Americans believe in access to reproductive care, that is not extremist.
Well, it's extreme, Maya, because as we saw with Val Demings, until Marco Rubio pushed it at the debate, she was for up to the woman's choice, which means up to the day of birth, and that is viewed by extreme by 75% of Americans think that viability is the standard. So anybody that thinks it up to the day of birth is out of lockstep.
Which, by the way, it's very few people that actually.
I understand that. Well, they do say that. I've been on this show with several of your clients, and they've said that it's up to the woman. If it's up to the woman, it's up to the day. When Val Demings was pushed, she came up and said viability, and that was the first time she had said that. She had used previously that it was always up to the woman.
Right.
So up to the woman means up to the day of birth, and that is out of lockstep.
I'm not sure it's fair though that doomed Charlie Crist's campaign.
No, but the fact that he focused on that rather than economic issues would have moved it. Well, if he had focused on insurance and tax and homeowners insurance and property taxes, that would have been. And by the way, for Vic, when his mother has homestead, the property can go up is 3% a year.
DeAndre, again, your question was about property insurance, right? And you're saying how it isn't considered like
not a tax,
right? Which it kind of is, though, right?
It is, and that's what my point was. That if the Democrats would focus on those issues rather than cultural issues, they would win.
If Rubio winds up as VP, can he live down statements like this, talking about Donald Trump in 2016, scathing?
Yes, people don't care.
They don't care. I mean, he's saying he's a con artist. He runs on the idea of fighting for the little guy, but he spent his entire career sticking it to the little guy. I mean, this is him over and over and over again.
Yeah, DeAndre, back to you for a second. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. So the other part of that is all the companies, and then re-regulation that goes in. Doesn't that really just let people or businesses, and if not politicians, exploit a tax, but just with more veracity in a sense?
Well, and the good news.
Thank you for the call.
But the good news is 18 major carriers announced 2 weeks ago for the first time in over a decade. 10 are having a 0 rate increase, and 8 are going to have a rate decline. So the property tax reforms that they've done in the last couple of years, which took too long, in my opinion, are starting to have effect. But when I'm talking to the OIR director, which is Office of Insurance Regulation, half of the rates now are for reinsurance, and there's only one reinsurance company based in America. So that's a problem that we have.
Okay, another big story that happened this week was the Wall Street Journal broke a story called "Behind Closed Doors, Biden Shows Signs of Slippage." And it began by talking about how this issue about Joe Biden, basically, in terms of his cognition, what have you, in terms of his energy levels. Maya, this is I wanted to ask you this about in terms of especially younger voters, voters of color. We've seen some polls that show that Joe Biden isn't getting the support that he got in 2020, and maybe some people attribute it to, again, his lack of energy. What are your thoughts about that?
For all the things that Barry has said that people don't care about, I would argue that this is one of the fewer things that folks care about on our side of the aisle, right? To the point that DeAndre made. People can't pay their rent. The property insurance is through the roof. People care about what's happening in Gaza. I think those are the issues that people are paying attention to, and not necessarily the faculties of the president when the administration has continued to deliver, right? Delivering on student loan debt relief, making sure that there are family and child tax credits for folks who are in the financial gap. So again, I don't think that that's something that folks are focusing on, but the right is certainly trying to blow this up to make this a bigger issue.
Right. So you think that's overrated?
1,000%.
Yeah.
Well, DeAndre just called. He didn't mention anything about the president's age. He said something about property insurance and those rates going up and not necessarily
but
having
most polls, even done by Democratic pollsters,
coverage,
show that there's concern about the president's age and mental faculties. There's also concerns about Trump's age and mental faculties. So I think to discount that is to say that all the pollsters for the Democratic Party that are paid millions of dollars are wrong, including people like Greenberg and people that have worked for Biden or for Obama and things like that. So it is a concern, but the economy is the number one driving issue, and that's not what Democrats.
Right?
But that's not what Democrats in Florida are talking about.
Well, I think that we have to learn to walk and chew gum at the same time. But again, it's the point that these things people care about access to reproductive care so much so that it's going to be on the ballot in Amendment 4, and the fact that people can't pay their rent, right? Like, so if this is a concern, if we're going to do a Likert scale, I wouldn't put this in the top 5, but sure, people can have concerns about it. But I guarantee you, if you put this up against the fact that people just had to pay their rent 7 days ago, this would top the charts.
Well, that's been my point. It's economic issues that are driving this. In fact, the Tampa Bay Times just did a poll with USF with 1,500, and here's the top 6 things that were the deciders in the race: the economy and jobs, inflation, immigration, healthcare, gun and violence. So it went 50%, 50%, 34, 25, 23. Abortion was at 22%. And
so where's Biden's age then, Barry, if you're saying that all these Democratic pollsters are saying otherwise?
I'm saying these are the 6 things that are. I know I agree. But my point here is that abortion is not an issue. Reproductive rights are at number 6 and it's only a 4-point advantage when you have the pro-life, pro-choice as far as deciding.
So the top 6 that you just said, and then you just said that we are discounting
gun violence, and public safety is a much bigger concern this year than abortion. And I think that's another thing that Democrats have a disadvantage on, is that they've been still hung by the defund the police and the Black Lives Matter movement.
Okay, right now it's 11:43 in the morning. You're listening to 2 political consultants here in the Tampa Bay area. Maya Brown, Hillsborough County Democrat. Barry Edwards from Pinellas County is now officially a Republican. And going back to this voter registration issue, let's talk about in Hillsborough County here, Maya. I want to talk to you. You've got candidates who are really running, right? You've got, I know, Ventris Driscoll is one of your clients. You've also got Nancy Milan, right, for tax collector. Are you concerned? Because right now, the voter registration numbers show roughly a little over 10,000 more plus Democrat than Republican. That sounds pretty good if you're a Democrat. However, it was roughly 70,000 4 years ago, that advantage for Democrats over Republicans. So Maya, what are you thinking about in some of the races coming up here in Hillsborough County in 2024?
Yeah, again, I mean, I think this is going to be a turnout situation. We have to give a message to folks that they care about and are going to be motivated to actually want to show up and submit a ballot or complete a ballot, excuse me. And I think that there have been efforts across this county, particularly that we are trying to widen the gap on voter registration. You're absolutely right. It has narrowed, but I certainly am optimistic and confident that this isn't going to take a deeper dive, that Republicans are going to beat us in terms of voter registration before November 5.
What do you think about that, Barry Edwards?
Well, so they just did the voter list maintenance, and the Democratic advantage went up to about 12,000. And I know the Democratic Party is doing a big voter registration in Hillsborough, but the Republicans started one too, and it's down to 10,300. So the Republicans are gaining about 400 a week, and it's organic. The problem for the Democrats is we are a self-sorting society. If I want to be, and people are moving to Florida because they like whether you like Ron DeSantis or not, they're moving here because of those reasons. The Republicans are gaining about 1,000 net per day statewide and about 400 in Hillsborough. And so I think after the voter registration list was cleaned, so I would think that, and I remember I thought that we were down to 40 a year ago, and I was correct. I think that the Republicans probably gained the voter registration advantage in August.
All right. Another thing I want to bring up is let's go back again to
just to dwell on that for a second, Barry, do people self-sort by politics? I mean, I know the big shift and so forth.
So people moving to Florida are Republican. 70% of the whites...
Aren't we more likely to self-sort by age in Florida?
No. Well, okay, so 70% of whites that have moved to Florida since Joe Biden is elected have registered Republican. And in the surveys that we've done, about 55-60% of the independents said they're conservative. So people are moving to Florida because they want the free state of Florida. They didn't like regulations. I met with the people I don't want to mention, but the crypto people. They moved to Florida because they wanted to get rid of regulations out of New York. And some
is that new since COVID? I'm sure the political draw here.
COVID, we had a consistent timeline where the Republicans were gaining, and then COVID exaggerated it, probably by 400% or 500%. So COVID
has been building since the 90s,
right?
It just accelerated.
Does that also include, Barry,
COVID
the folks down in Miami who were changing the voter registrations of folks in assisted living facilities? Does that include
that's like, we can talk about 5 or 10 people or 25, whatever, and that's why we have laws to stop that. And those numbers are inconsequential. That's as ridiculous as saying that the election was stolen in Florida by Donald Trump or whatever. So that's just a red herring. And we prosecute. We have a huge department. I don't think we need as many because the supervisors of elections, when you register to vote, by the way, if you don't come in and do it in person, you have to put the last 4 numbers of your Social Security number in. And so the supervisor checks that. They send it to Tallahassee, and the state of Florida, checks to say whether your last 4 digits match the other information. So it's almost impossible to false register in Florida. So we have a lot of systems to catch this. And there's been no lawsuit in Florida that's shown that fraud has affected an election.
Okay, again, if you're just tuning right now, it's 11:48 in the morning here. Mitch Perry with Ben Montgomery. We're talking state politics here, essentially here in Florida. We're, a little over, roughly 5 months, 4.5 months now from the general election. Again, the thing was we began the show talking about with Maya Brown is this new poll out that shows the Democrats excited about the fact that maybe this state might be a little closer than it was anticipated because in terms of the presidential race, because again, an overwhelming idea here is the fact that Republicans have really, in the last few years, who've always controlled Tallahassee since the 90s, as Vic DeMaio said earlier, have controlled the governor's mansion since the 90s. That's when Democrats actually had a voter registration lead of sometimes hundreds of thousands of people. That has now completely flipped 900,000 now people this week officially went over Republicans over Democrats. So it's, I don't know if there's any Democrat that's really safe, depending on where they're at congressionally. There's going to be no real change, I don't believe.
Well, and one of the big things, too, to think about voter registration in Florida. We had Democrats in Florida when I worked for the Speaker, John Mills, and those folks back in Harry Johnston, Senate President, is the most conservative members of the legislature were Democrats and the most liberal members of the legislature were Democrats. And so Democrats had the whole spectrum because they were the only party.
Right.
Remember when Bill Young got elected to the Florida Senate, he was the only Republican in the Florida Senate. He caucused with the Republicans or the Democrats.
Really? He caucused with the Democrats.
Caucused with the Democrats, and they made him a chairman of a committee. So there's performative. So Democrats that live in Tampa are probably primarily performative Democrats. They vote Democratic tickets. If you're a Democrat that lives out in Fishhawk or Plant City, you may be a performative Democrat, but you may be a performative Republican, which means you vote Republican. Whereas Republicans in Florida are all performative Republicans. If you take 100 Republicans in Florida, they're all going to vote Republican 90% of the time. So there's still probably probably 18, 19% of Democrats in Florida that are performative Republicans, even though they're registered Democrats. They're the last vestiges of the Dixiecrats.
Right. Most of them in North Florida, I believe.
Right. But there's a lot but in Arcadia, in the mid part of the state. So it's not just North Florida. Okay. And so that's a problem the Democrats have.
Okay. So, by the way, Charles writes in from down in Manatee County. He says he changed from an NPA to Republican so he can vote against, quote, the Florida GOP maggots, he says. We've also got...
Is that rare, Barry?
That's very rare. The research shows that the last time we had strategic voting work was in Berkeley in the 60s. It's very difficult. And we try that. Both parties spend millions of dollars. Now, what did work is, say you and I are running against each other, and we determine that you're more extreme or I'm more extreme than you are in a Republican primary, so we want me to win. Then the Democrats came in the Senate races 2 years ago, and they spent $10 or $20, $30 million either propping up the most extreme candidate or rubbishing the less extreme, and that helped affect in the primaries. But as far as people switching parties and things like that, it never happened.
Let's go to Mike in Sarasota. Mike, are you there?
Yes, nice discussion today, everybody. I just wanted to point out the Wall Street Journal article about Joe Biden quotes two people not really known for being serious or trustworthy. That would be Kevin McCarthy and Devin Nunes. And furthermore, since that organization is owned by Rupert Murdoch, I don't think anyone takes it seriously. It's like Fox News after they had to pay up almost $1 billion for lying. The case between Biden and Trump really comes down to morals. And Joe Biden hasn't been convicted of rape. Joe Biden doesn't have a whole 30-some-odd felony charges. He never ran a fake college. He never talks about wanting to have sex with his daughter. I mean, I could go on for hours. So it's really about human decency, and that's why Biden's going to win.
Mike, to go into your bring up the Journal article, you're correct in terms of people. A lot of people were very angry at that article because there were not any Democrats actually quoted by name in there. It was, like you said, McCarthy and I think some other Republicans. So, yeah, maybe that article did not have the push that some people thought it was going to have. But
and one of the things you ought to think about, too, is Mike. Dick Wirthlin, the great pollster for Ronald Reagan, somebody I consider a mentor, wrote several books with my brother, that when people voted for Reagan in '84 versus Vice President Mondale, the vast majority of Americans were closer when they took 10 issues. And that's why I think the age thing matters. It's in the back of your mind, and we pick up more of that in focus groups, is that people were closer to Vice President Mondale on the issues than they were Ronald Reagan. Yet they voted for Ronald Reagan, even though we said issue number one, I believe I forget Mondale's first name.
Walter.
I was closer
Fritz.
to him. I closer to him. So out of 7 issues, they'd be on Mondale's side, only 3 on Reagan. But at the end of the day, they felt more comfortable with Reagan. They felt that he was more of a leader.
Emotional, right? People a lot of times vote on emotion.
And that's why I think the age thing, and that's why if you can get Trump to slip up age-wise, then you neutralize that.
Maya, I want to bring you this. We got somebody who wrote in we talked about voter ID a little while ago. This person writes in and says, not so easy sometimes to just bring in my Florida ID. My aunt was in assisted living. She had no birth certificate. She had to go get her ID. I had to go to state records to get a copy of her birth certificate, make an appointment to get ID, pick her up in her wheelchair, take her to appointment to get ID. So not that easy just to show up with ID for many Floridians. Brings up the issue maybe just of the bills that the legislature have passed in recent years that make it, frankly, harder to vote in some cases.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Like we saw this past legislative session that the legislature was in direct opposition of trans folks producing and obtaining identification with the gender that they so choose and identify as. And then also this concept again of DeSantis and his police militia when it comes to voter issues. Barry said it himself. We don't have issues of voter fraud in the state. And so this over-policing that we're seeing by the governor in terms of this standalone law enforcement agency is ridiculous, and I believe it's an intimidation tactic. And to the concept even of the fact that we have a voter registration disadvantage across the state, that's going to play out even more so because of the gerrymandered maps that we have, which have been shared in court that they are illegal, right? And so, yes, this is going to have an effect down ballot. Sure, as Victor Maya said before he left, this is not going to necessarily impact Florida's necessity as part of Biden's reelect. But again, this is a two-part situation that we now have to deal with, the fact that these maps are illegal, and now we have this issue of voter registration and voter intimidation that's coming out of the governor's administration.
Well, and I agree with Maya on this one, because if you're right, you're right, you're wrong. There's been a chilling effect. Now, the felon restoration was ill-conceived in that the Democrats thought they were going to gain these big advantage, but because there's more people in prison that are white than black, and they just assumed the blacks would vote Democrat and whites wouldn't. But anyway, but the fact is that after the Biden or DeSantis did his whole office with all these cops, and then they did the perp walk. Remember, they arrested half a dozen or a dozen, whatever. It sent a message that if you screw up, and even though you should be able to have your voter registration, and so felons aren't. First of all, you have a very narrow group of felons that want to register. Mm-hmm. And out of that group that did want to register, they're chilled because they don't want to get arrested again and perp walked. So that has had a chilling effect. Now, the raw numbers are probably only a few hundred, but a few hundred is a few hundred, and people should have the right. So I don't like the fact how they did that. But we also we need to hold the people accountable that registered them, need to ask the right questions.
All right, let's go back to the phones. Nick from Tampa. Nick, you're on the phone. You're on the air.
Yes, I'd like to know, I don't remember the woman's name, but Biden digitally fingered her. And
oh, gee. What? No, thanks, sir. I don't know what you're talking about there.
There was a complaint about him, and what I think the caller was trying to say is that when a Republican is accused of sexual harassment, no matter how spurious, we have to believe.
I have not heard that at all.
There was a woman that accused Biden, and it was in the national press, and he denied it. And
I heard about him putting somebody's hand. Anyway.
No, but anyway.
Somebody just wrote to us, Barry, and says they want to know if you're related to John Edwards.
I wish, but no.
That huckster John Edwards, he says.
Well, he was our vice presidential nominee, if you're a Democrat. Remember that.
He was with John Kerry in 2004. Okay, we just have a few minutes left. Maya, I want to give you what else? What do you want to get across here to the listeners here in the last couple of minutes of the show here about the nature of this election coming out, not only nationally and with the presidential race, but also in the local level here?
Well, one, I want to clarify something. Barry made the argument that Democrats didn't realize that the majority of folks who would be returning citizens on rights restoration were white. I think that certainly was something that we knew, and for the folks who were a part of that campaign, certainly made that a messaging tactic that this was going to affect many more people just than folks of color. That's number one. Number two is, if you're listening, certainly make sure that your voter registration is up to date. That if you typically voted by mail, go to your supervisor of elections website and re-register for this election cycle so you can get, especially if you are registered as a partisan, your primary election ballot and your general election ballot. Those are the two primary things. And then the third call to action I would give is make sure that you share with your folks that, yes, there's a presidential election that's going to be on your ballot, but so many issues are going to be on your ballot as well. Recreational marijuana access, which is Amendment 3, Amendment 4, which is the government interference, abortion amendment, and then, of course, the elections for constitutional officers in Hillsborough County. So, again, so much airtime has been given to this head-to-head between Biden and Trump, which I understand. But again, folks, if for whatever reason, if they don't want to participate in the presidential, certainly make sure that you are prepared and educated and informed about what's going to be on your ballot down the ballot.
And the municipal races really are the action. In the congressional seats, you're not going to have any changes in Florida. Soto's going to win, and
because of those messed up maps. that is exactly right, Barry.
So that's in the Florida Senate. The Republican advantage with money is just so great. I mean, we're waiting for the reports in 3 days, but the Republican Senate caucus is sitting on $28 million. The Democratic caucus $1 million. There's a possibility. My Republican friends think they're going to gain a seat or two
in Congress,
in the state Senate.
Oh,
Congress is a push,
right?
In the state House, the advantages of the Republican money is also going to come into play in gerrymandered districts, which California does the same thing. Devin Nunes lives in Sarasota because they drew his district from a 60-40 to a 40.
I also want to say here before we leave here is that NPA voters are roughly 30% of the electorate here, and we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see how they come in on November. This let's see. Fez writes in from Bradenton, says I was convinced to switch to register Republican by a group of 3 of my friends who did in Manatee County to help support Nikki Haley in the primary. Besides for that group, then I'll switch. Then I also had another friend that she said she registered Republican because that's the only way your vote gets counted. Well,
it does happen, Barry.
What's that?
It does happen.
What's that?
Strategic voting.
Yeah, and in fact, you've got to do strategic voting for the primary August 20th because I'm an NPA. I can't vote in a that's a whole different story.
But the numbers are they don't affect the election. I mean,
of course.
In 2020, the other vote was 24%. In Florida, 37% of the vote was Democratic, 9% Republican.
Okay, Barry, thank you so much. Barry, thanks for coming in here. Got a little feisty. We apologize for our listeners. Some of our people did not like the fact that there was some shouting going on. Apologize. It won't happen again next week. Barry Edwards, thank you so much for coming in. Maya Brown, thank you so much for as well. And Victor DeMai.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Ben, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. Good work.
All right. So we'll be back next week. We have a really interesting guest next week, but we're not going to tell you until you have to tune in. Thank you for Irene taking the phone call, Skip Scassi being our engineer, for Ben Montgomery, Mitch Perry. Thanks for listening to Skinny. We'll see you again same time next week.
This turn.
WMNF Tampa.
Shows you all.